And welcome, everybody, to the Just Parlay show here at the Max Wagers Network. It is Friday, August 19th. I'm your co-host, Scott Reichel, and joining me, as always, is parlay expert Chris King. Chris, how's it going with you? How's your Thursday?
Thursday was terrible from the perspective of a lot of the things we thought that were going to happen didn't. What happened to the Dallas Wings?
They got run out of the building. That's what happened. They cut it to, I believe, 6 with like 7 minutes to go in the third quarter. And it was like, all right, they're probably going to lose this game based on how the game's been going, but they've been hanging around. And then you check back about 20 minutes later in real time, and they're down like 25 in the fourth quarter. They got absolutely run out of the building in the second half. And yeah, I don't think they're going to win the series.
Yeah, I mean, Connecticut probably played their best game of the last 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, they were great. And Dallas, of course, wasn't really up to par. It was a classic one of those two ways to look at it, where one team was awful and the other team was good. I mean, you don't win by 25 if the other team also doesn't play well. So Connecticut definitely looked sharp, especially at home in front of the fans in the playoffs. But I was expecting a lot more out of Dallas. It just seemed like they came out extremely either tentative or just extremely tight, and they got punished for it. And of course, basketball is still, it's a classic. I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. It's a series of kind of episodic games where I'm not going to overreact to one bad outing because you start again at 0 the next day. But I do
True.
want to at least point out the fact that Dallas didn't really look like they had any moments where they succeeded at any point. It just seemed like if they ever went on a run, it was for about a minute, and then they got outscored by like 10 in the span of about a 3-minute stretch right after it. It seemed like Dallas was just on another tier, and not in a good way. It seemed like Connecticut was just a much better basketball team.
Yeah, and then Seattle rallied to beat Washington because I know they were down in the fourth quarter. Washington still covered, unfortunately for us, because we thought the Storm would win that one and cover the line. But, a good rally by the Storm in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, one of those where they ended up winning, which we were right about. However, they did not cover. So we were also kind of wrong because they missed out on covering by a hook. I can't say it was a bad beat or anything because Seattle was losing a decent portion of that second half. Jewel Lloyd, a couple of big shots there, hit the go-ahead floater with, I believe it was 40 seconds left, I think. But I can't say I'm fully surprised. I thought that series would be somewhat competitive. I just thought Seattle would sweep, and we're halfway there living on a prayer. So we'll see what happens in game 2. But has anything really surprised you besides the Wings getting absolutely killed? Because so far, it seems like every series has gone the way that I thought. I know people will say Chicago losing is a bit of a shock, but I know that we looked at the spread and thought that it was just too many points for the Liberty. Has
Yeah.
anything else really shocked you in the playoffs, or kind of just what you expected?
Well, I know that you talked about yesterday that the Aces looked like they hadn't faced a zone before ever.
Yeah, they covered anyway though, so they're cool in my book again.
But do you expect them to play better basketball in game 2 than they did game 1?
I think they do. The thing is, do I really want to lay 15.5 with the Aces? Truth is, I really don't mind it because of the fact that the Aces played so terribly for about 3 quarters, and they still covered. And in addition to missing Taurasi and Diggins Smith, I'll have to confirm if Diggins Smith's going to be out for game 2 as well. But one of their better players that was even left ruptured her Achilles in game 1. So Phoenix is even more shorthanded than they were previously. And if you want to talk about my favorite, I'd say play for game 2, I actually like the first half in game 2 for the Aces, probably close to either 8.5 or 9. I just feel like Phoenix kind of surprised the Aces. The Aces went into the home game, they just beat Seattle, and they probably thought to themselves, we're going to kill this team. And it seemed like there was a little bit of a lack of intensity, especially in the first quarter, because Phoenix was kind of hanging around there, and they were leading with like 2 seconds left in the first quarter. And then the Aces ended up leading by 5, I believe, at the end of a half. I just think Vegas comes out more focused in game 2, and they know that if they win this, then they get extra rest because they'll be able to just skip game 3 in advance. Would it surprise you at all if Vegas comes out in game 2 a lot more focused from the opening jump, because that really is what I'm expecting to happen.
It wouldn't surprise me if Vegas came out and led like 20-2,
Yeah.
early, and then just rolled the rest of the way. Like you said, Phoenix is a beat-up team. Without their top 2 stars, they really don't have a whole lot to rely on outside of DeShields. And let's face it, this isn't the Mercury team that you're used to seeing by any stretch.
Yeah, and once again, it was a little bit of a surprise that Phoenix kept the game close for so long. It doesn't really change the fact that they only scored 63 points, and the fact that the Aces only scored 79. I think we're both expecting the Aces to get worst case scenario into the 80s in this game. So I do like the under in that game, which I find a little bit laughable that the total is 167, even though game 1 landed 142. Like, I doubt you're going to see a 28-point uptick in between game 1 and 2.
Maybe they're hoping that the Aces are going to score 100 and then Phoenix can just score in the 60s.
It could be, but I think that the Aces might cover the full game in general. I do like them in the first half. I think that they'll come out and just bury this team from the get-go. But I think the one thing that does surprise me is the fact that there are no games on Friday in the WNBA. I figured that they would have a worst-case scenario, the 2 games that were on Wednesday, and just have game 2 for Friday, because once again, there's no travel. Game 1 and game 2 are in the same location. So I'm not sure why you need 2 days off in between games 1 and 2. That I found kind of weird. But either way, WNBA resumes on a Saturday. But that was one thing that kind of surprised me, so to speak.
Speaking of people getting killed, Rye said he killed some wings at lunch.
Good for Rye. I'm happy for you. I'm curious if Rye is more of a spicy wing guy or if he's more of just a regular, either basic barbecue or some type of tangy sauce guy. Are you a spicy wing guy, or you're more of a savory, like tangy type of sauce?
I like for my wings to have some zip to them. I mean, I make my own most of the time now because otherwise, most places down here don't make them like they do back home. But yeah, I like my wings to have some zip.
Well, when you say don't make it like they use like other places, I'm assuming that in Buffalo they are known for their spice.
Yeah, and we don't call them buffalo wings like everybody else does. We just call them wings. It's like Jim talks about Chinese food. If you're in China, they don't call it Chinese food. They just call it food.
I just think of Steen saying that Kansas City calls it. He said that they grill and they don't barbecue or something like that. Like he's really a stickler when it comes to it.
He likes to rip on you because you said that you're going to barbecue hot dogs.
Oh, that's just funny. I think that it's just fun to mess with him because people from Kansas City take pride in their barbecue or grilling, but they refer to one specific like term, and if you use the other one, they snap. So it's kind of just funny to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, he's brought it up before where he said that you were talking about barbecuing. He's like, yeah, barbecue and hot dogs. Like, what the fuck is that shit?
Yeah, so that was always something I used to do just to make me laugh a little bit. But any takeaways from yesterday's games? Maybe not in the WNBA, but in baseball, we talked about how it was a little bit of a weird card. We were not surprised that Wainwright and the Cardinals absolutely dominated because Sanzatella on the road. No, thank you. Boston got crushed by Pittsburgh, which was a bit surprising. Apparently, the Donaldson home run for the Yankees meant nothing because they got
apparently
blown
not
out.
because I thought the Yankees were going to win. I actually wrote that game for winners and whiners and picked them to win over Toronto. And then I looked and saw it was 9-2 and said, well, that didn't pan out.
Yeah, I've officially written off the Padres from any future considerations for bets.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too because they were my play of the day yesterday. And they did absolutely nothing. They made Anibal Sanchez look good. He only got 1 hit in 5 innings.
Yep.
The bad part that I feel for Darvish because he threw 8 1/3, and he left with 2 guys on to watch Hader come in and plunk Voit, and then walk the next guy on 4 pitches to force him the go-ahead run.
Were you surprised at all that they kept Darvish in as long as they did? Because his pitch count was pretty manageable. I was surprised they kept him in after the first guy got on.
I was a little surprised, but I mean, he had only thrown he only ended up in the 90s in pitches, didn't he?
I think he ended up at 96, I think.
I mean, talk about being effective. That's a Maddox-like start.
Yeah.
because I mean the Nationals were just up there hacking at whatever and going down in 1 or 2 pitches.
Yeah, and
But
Hader was obviously not good. Which
no,
was a
Hader
problem.
basically just turned into Taylor Rogers, who you already had and got rid of.
Yeah, but I had the team total over 4.5 minus 125 was a great price, and it closed at 155. Bases loaded, 1 out against the 5.25 bullpen ERA guy, and Grisham strikes out, and then Soto strikes out. The bases loaded, and then they actually have the tying run to force extras in the bottom of the ninth, and Profar grounds into a double play, even though Finnegan threw 1 strike in about the last 7 pitches, and he grounds out into a 2-1 count double play. So I'm not a big Profar guy. I think that he's, a decent utility player, but I don't know why he's batting leadoff on that team or why he's towards the top of the lineup. He was batting leadoff, and now Grisham batted leadoff yesterday.
Yeah, because I want a guy batting 180 something, batting leadoff.
I was gonna say, so I'm not really a big Profar guy. I think he's okay, I guess, but I feel like a problem in baseball, not to go into a full rant, I don't understand the approach of most batters at the plate. And yes, I know that Soto struck out the bases loaded, but at least he'll walk 1 or 2 times a game. Like, he knows how to work the strike zone. I don't know why you're not forcing Finnegan to throw strikes.
Yeah, he threw 7 strikes on 19 pitches.
And yet Profar is just hacking away. And it's like, all right, I would dare him to throw back-to-back strikes. And now it turns out that the pitch that Profar swung at was a strike. But I just feel like there's no real at-bat construction in today's baseball. And it seems like a lot of batters try to hit the big fly, and there's no, at least, recognition of what type of struggles my opposition in terms of starting pitcher or reliever is facing when it comes to throwing strikes.
Right, and I mean, was it Torres that swung at the first pitch and bounced that? Yeah, and bounced that double play against that was against Seattle, right?
Was it Fairbanks? I think.
Oh, that's right. It was Fairbanks, right? The other
Fairbanks walked Judge on 4 pitches, whether or not there were a ball or a strike in there, whatever. The point is, he walked on 4 pitches, bases loaded, and Torres swings first pitch. Can you dare him to throw a strike first before you start swinging away? Just, that's an example, but it seems like a lot of batters just don't really read the room. And Soto's been walking. I know he hasn't had many clutch hits. I got to call out Josh Bell. He's been terrible for San Diego. I mean,
he's got I think 2 RBIs.
I think so. He's batting somewhere in the 100s since coming over to San Diego. Drury hasn't been much better. I mean, Drury at least had the grand slam in his first outing or appearance, and he had another home run after that. I think Drury's batting somewhere in either the high 100s or low 200s. But
Bell's hitting $1.25.
Yeah, but a lot of the guys that San Diego acquired have really not panned out so far. And even Soto's been okay. He has 1 home run, a lot of walks, but he hasn't had many big hits.
No, he hasn't. And I thought when he came up in the 7th yesterday that he was going to, put one on the board, but apparently not.
Yeah,
and to your point about Drury, 204, but he's actually been effective. He's driven in 14 runs in 15 games with San Diego.
Okay, so I thought he'd be in the low 200s, high 190s, and he's literally 204. But when 2 of your main hitting acquisitions are basically at the Mendoza, or in Bell's case, well below the Mendoza, that's a problem. And Soto's numbers, I don't have in front of me.
302.
Okay, I was going to assume he's in the high 200s, but his on base percentage is somewhere in the 400s because he walks 2 times a game.
Yeah, 456.
So that's what I would have assumed. So that's still pretty solid, but the point is you do want your best player to not walk all the time and to drive in some key runs some of the time. And Soto's been up in some big spots, and he hasn't exactly come through yet. So
yeah, I mean, think about that. Drury's driven in 14 runs in 15 games. Soto's driven in 3.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a surprise for me. I've officially written off the Padres for the rest of the season. I will not back them ever again. It's one thing if they're gonna burn me once against Anibal Sanchez, that's fine. But you can't burn me twice in the span of a week. Like I'm not going back to you. I can't. So I'm done with the Padres. They're a psycho team. Besides that, I'm not surprised that the Brewers won because you had Burns against Heaney. I was very surprised the Astros scored 21 runs.
Yeah, I mean that game was over early. You have to wonder, is it going to affect Chicago today? Because, they had to burn their bullpen. Velasquez threw. Velasquez shouldn't even be in the majors.
No, he pitched
B,
3
he
innings.
pitched 3 innings.
Yeah.
But yeah, 21 runs. Bregman outdrove the White Sox by himself because he drove in 6. Horrible performance for Tony La Russa. Your team wins the first 2 games, which you had no business winning in the first place, and then you lose the last 2.
That's the silver lining, though, because even though they got killed by 16 runs, they still won the series. So you can look at it that way. They're still in 3rd place. They're a game and a half behind Minnesota, and they are 2.5 behind Cleveland. So we'll see if Chicago gets it going. Houston, we know, is going to win the division. They're up 11.5. That's a no-brainer. So I don't know how much each individual game actually matters at this point, especially with the Yankees falling apart. They're going to run away with home field in the AL, so we'll see what happens moving forward. But either way, point is, Houston woke up yesterday. We'll see if they can keep it moving into, or keep it rolling into, the upcoming series against Atlanta. Very good series there. World Series rematch, which should be fun.
Yeah, and Nick asks, what do you think of the Panthers +6, the Packers -3, and the Rams on the money line against Houston tonight?
So I like the Packers -3 in this spot. They're at home. You look at the takeaways from the first preseason game, Green Bay's defense was not particularly good. However, you look at the 49ers' actual quarterback depth chart, it's not bad for preseason. And the Saints already announced that Jameis Winston's not going to play, which means you have Dalton, again, who was very good in the first preseason game. The problem is the backup's Ian Book. And Ian Book, he might be playing 3 quarters. I thought that he was especially awful in the first preseason game. I don't think he should be in the league. I think he's that bad. But when you get sacked 5 times in a preseason game, I have serious questions about your offensive line or Book's, I'd say, tendency to hold on to the ball too long. Green Bay did have 3 sacks against San Francisco's quarterbacks last week. I think they can get after Book frequently. And Jordan Love, we know, is a mediocre quarterback. He had 3 interceptions against the Niners, but he did have 2 touchdowns. And Etling was very good. So I do think Green Bay has value, especially with Winston not playing, because you get to fade Ian Book for probably a half.
True.
Isn't that good enough?
You would think so. I mean, I'd like to thank the Seahawks for, A, not showing up yesterday, and B, turning it over on 4th down inside the Bears 5 instead of kicking a field goal that would have put that game over the total.
Well, I mean, they were down 16, so they kind of had to go for it. But that was definitely a huge sweat if you had the under for no reason at all. The game should have been an easy rocking chair under, and somebody had $100,000 on it. Wasn't me, but they ended up winning. And I actually watched the final couple minutes only with that 100K person in mind. I was rooting for him while watching the game because I didn't really have much action. I had a little bit on the under as well, but it wasn't anything substantial. But yeah, it took a lot. You had the muffed punt touchdown. Then you ended up having the muffed punt, which resulted in Seattle getting the ball back with about 3 minutes to go. They scored, then got an onside kick, then converted converted 2 separate 4th downs, and then ended up getting stopped on a goal line stand. And then Pete Carroll, down 16 points with 30 seconds to go, is burning all his timeouts on defense to get the ball back. They get the ball back with 20 seconds left, and they call a draw. What the hell was Pete Carroll doing in the final 50 seconds of that game?
I think Pete Carroll thought that it was, he misread the scoreboard. Or he just wanted to let somebody run the ball.
It just blew my mind because Eberflus did the right thing as Chicago's coach, and he took a knee because you're up 16 with the ball. The game's over. I know that Seattle could get the ball back hypothetically, but why bother? You're down 16. The game's over. So Eberflus takes a knee, and I just see Pete Carroll sprinting down the sideline calling timeouts. It's like, what are you doing? The game's over. Like you look like an idiot right now. Like just go home. And then they get the ball back, and they don't even throw a Hail Mary. I don't really know what the idea was there. It's not a bad beat if you had the over, because it was a miracle you even got that close. It would have been a ridiculously bad beat if the over got there, because the under was clearly the right side the entire game.
Yeah, Steen said the Bears' first and goal from the 1 with 3 straight horrible passes was the killer for the over.
Yep, definitely true too. But we both like the under. Some random guy in Vegas did because he had $100,000 on it. But yeah, I
It does
thought that
have
the
nothing better to do if you're betting $100,000 on a preseason game.
to be honest, I kind of want to be friends with that guy because that guy knows what's up. But still, we talked about it yesterday. I thought that the overs would be, I'd say, a complete pass for me. Occasional spots, of course, if you like the quarterback depth chart for both teams. But after week 1 was so profitable for the overs, I figured that Vegas' worst case scenario would overcorrect because the public would keep betting the overs. And from what we saw through the line movement of week 2, there's a lot of games that have totals in like the mid 40s. This is preseason. Like, you're not used to seeing many totals even reach 40. And now you see a lot of 44 and a halves, 43 and a halves. Yesterday's game, which involved one team with no quarterback depth chart at all, and that total was still 40 and a half.
Yeah.
I feel like it's either unders or pass for me this week. Unders are not going to go undefeated, but I'm at least pointing out that the overs, it's not a kept secret. Everyone knows, and I guarantee you that if anybody's going to overreact to it, it would be the odds makers.
Yeah, I see that some of the numbers have started coming back because now the Falcons and Jets for Monday night opened at 42.5. It's down to 38.5.
Okay, well,
Cincinnati and the Giants went from 42 to 38.5.
The Falcons one, I actually don't even know if I like the under in that one, just because I get that Wilson's out. The problem is he really has not been good at all in camp, and Flacco's been incredible in preseason, and he didn't even play in the opener.
And then you got Mike White.
But I'm saying Mike White wasn't good last week, but he has experience, and they also used who the hell did they use? Strevler, thank you, and he was good too. But you might see Flacco play. And truth is, I said this on Twitter. It might seem unpopular. I think if you have a Jets team total over ticket, you want Flacco behind center. According to all reports, Flacco's been the best quarterback in training camp for that team.
And just real quick, since it's a game that we won't get to since it'll be over the weekend, the Ravens will look to extend their preseason win streak to 22 on Sunday as they take on the Cardinals. That line is now in Baltimore minus 5.5.
I believe it was 6 or 6.5, so there has been some buyback on the Cardinals. I did find a pretty solid website, Walter Football, that actually gives out all the records for coaches, as well as a year-by-year breakdown in preseason and a week-by-week breakdown. Kingsbury, in his preseason career, 3-0 in week 1, but he's actually 0-2 in week 2. So he's never really been a good week 2 preseason coach. I mean, I feel like you just bet Baltimore until they lose, right? I mean, I can't really see any other way to approach this game. Can you?
Not really. I mean, let's face it, we don't know who's going to play for either of these teams, but it doesn't really matter when you're Baltimore because we played Tyler Huntley. You know, he got some pretty good run last year in the regular season after Lamar went down. So he's a capable quarterback. Meanwhile, I don't even remember off the top of my head who Arizona's backup is. That's probably because he's not very good.
Well, and if you want to look at other Ravens news, they did end up cutting Hundley, but that's because Anthony Brown looked really good in the first preseason game. So that doesn't really change much. That just means
nobody likes Hundley anyway.
But I was going to say, that just means Brown's going to get more run. That's really all that tells me. But they're going to use 2 quarterbacks throughout. Lamar's not going to play. Baltimore just cares, and they've won 21 straight. They're 19-2 against the spread in that stretch. But my favorite play for preseason in terms of value for this upcoming schedule, I don't know how the Steelers are getting 3 points. Can you explain to me how the Steelers are getting 3 points against Jacksonville?
I guess it'll be the same thing that we said last week because Jacksonville has now played 2 games instead of 1.
They've been bad in both.
Yeah, well, but that was the argument why we thought they were going to get point, or why they were favored last week, and then they of course got smacked around.
They were doing well early on, and then Cleveland ended up smacking them around in the second half. But I'm looking at the lines here, and the Steelers are +3. Jacksonville, we know, has looked bad in the 2 preseason games. Pittsburgh's quarterbacks looked really good. They scored 30-plus points in the first week because all 3 quarterbacks look sharp. Tomlin, though, underrated 13-4 straight up in his last 17 preseason games, and Doug Peterson is 2-9 straight up in his last 11. I just haven't seen anything from Jacksonville's backup quarterbacks, which instills confidence. And the fact that Peterson's awful in preseason and Tomlin's 13-4 in the last 17, I think you take a shot there with the money line getting plus money.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, it's been announced that Josh Allen will be playing tomorrow for the Bills against the Broncos.
Okay.
So that line went from a 1-point underdog to a 6-point favorite.
Yeah. I personally assume that Allen plays one series tops. But
I think he might play a quarter.
I still can't believe the Bills won last week. Had that miraculous comeback against the Colts. I can't believe they actually won the game.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I looked at it and I said, well, they turned the ball over 307 times.
Yeah.
Basically, every possession was a turnover. I mean, one wasn't Keenum's fault. The ball was tipped by Crowder. It got intercepted, but they get an interception. And they're in the red zone, and Keenum throws another interception. But still, I didn't think they were going to come back and win that game. They played well in the fourth quarter, but you're not going to see Matt Barkley in a meaningful game during the regular season.
Yeah, I was looking at the Bills. I don't know if I want to lay 6.5 in preseason, but either on a teaser or money line, maybe in a parlay, I don't mind Buffalo because McDermott is 8-0 in his last 8 preseason games. So he's been really good. Hackett's only had one preseason game. They beat the Cowboys, and the Cowboys haven't had a good preseason in, I don't know, a decade and a half. They're always a terrible preseason team. But I do like Buffalo at home to get the job done if you want to throw in a money line pick or a teaser pick. But looking at everything else in preseason to go through what I like quickly, I also kind of like Cleveland +3 against Philadelphia. I know Philadelphia might get out to an early lead, so you might be able to find the decent live price on Cleveland. But Stefanski's 4-0 in preseason in his career, and Sirianni's 0-4. He's 0-3-1. I'm not sure why Philly's laying when their coach has never won a preseason game before.
Well, I mean, I guess they're just thinking that we don't know what Cleveland's going to do with their quarterback depth chart. Now that the whole Watson thing is finally decided, maybe they're just going to wrap Jacoby Brissett in bubble wrap because they don't want to have him go down and then be stuck either where you're trying to have to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo from behind the 8 ball because everybody knows you don't have a quarterback and or play Josh Dobbs.
Yeah, it could be. Philly's quarterback situation is actually pretty good for preseason. It's why I like the over against the Jets last week because I actually like Reed Sinnett in preseason. But you have a winless coach in the preseason against an undefeated coach in the preseason, and the undefeated coach is getting 3 points. I think there's worse underdogs to take.
And that total's actually dropped too because it opened at 39.5. It's down to 35.5 or 36.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind the over there too.
You have to wonder if people are bought into the under so hard that they're driving these lines back down.
Could be. I'm sure some of it's going to be quarterback news as well. But I actually do like the backups for both teams when it comes to preseason. So that's kind of a thought there. Besides that, I don't mind the Chargers -3 against the Cowboys. Mike McCarthy, 0-7 straight up in his last 7 preseason games. And the Cowboys, historically speaking, are awful in preseason. Dak should not play at all in preseason. But the Chargers lost a close game to the Rams. I think they could get the job done. But that's really only going through just the coaching trends. But I do find it weird that the Eagles are laying 3, and I find it especially weird that the Jaguars are laying 3. I don't really get either line.
Bill, talking about asking if you like the Patriots. That line went from 3 to 6.
I really have no thoughts on that game. The Panthers announced today that P.J. Walker is going to start the game. So the line's moved a lot because I'm assuming that means that Mayfield and Darnold are not going to play. You're probably going to see Walker get the first half and then Corral get the second half. Corral went 1 for 9.
All right. But he did lead that game-winning drive.
Just saying. So he went 1 for 9. I'm not exactly sold on him as an option for the second half. That's why the line is moved. But I don't really have many thoughts. I think I like the under in that game just because I really don't like Carolina's quarterback options for this game since they announced that the 2 people competing for the starting quarterback spot are competing because it seems like Mayfield got the job already. They're both not going to play. So if Carolina's using a 3rd stringer and a 4th stringer, I'm not going to take an over. So I think it's under or pass for me.
Yeah, because you're going to see a lot of Bailey Zappi probably too.
And Zappe was pretty good last week, but Belichick spoke publicly about the value of joint practice, and it seems like he cares more about the actual practices than the games themselves. And
True.
Carolina and the Patriots have gotten into it a couple of times with some fights in joint practice this past week. It wouldn't surprise me both coaches just say, "All right, let's take it easy and get out of here." So
Yep.
I like the under in that game.
And Bill also talking about the BC Lions tonight as they go on the road to take on the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Do you have that game on a slide or no?
I don't have it on a slide, but I do have it as a pick. I do like BC. They came back last week and beat the Stamps 41-40, scoring 10 points in the last 3.5 minutes or so. Yeah. Won it on a field goal as time ran out. Saskatchewan had lost 3 straight before they beat Edmonton. Remember, we were talking about that game when it was going on, when Edmonton got called for a pyramiding penalty on a field goal attempt. Basically, the old leapfrog play that you see in the NFL, they just call it pyramiding. Gave Saskatchewan on a first down. They managed to punch it in to win 34-23. Still not very convinced by Saskatchewan. Cody Fajardo has not looked good. And if it wasn't for the 7 penalties Edmonton took in the fourth quarter, the Elks might have won that game. So, I like BC. I think it's minus. I think it was 4, 3.5 or 4. It was up to 5.5. It's come back down. I think BC will win on the road.
Yeah, we'll definitely see how that game goes. But, I mean, everything you said about Fajardo has definitely been true. And that's been...
and Nathan Rourke has looked really good for BC.
Yeah, and Rourke was a pretty decent quarterback at Ohio in college, and it seems like he's done pretty well in the CFL.
And then his brother is playing in Ohio.
Yeah, since we talked about the preseason and since we talked about the CFL, there is one type of football that we have not talked about yet, and that's going to segue us into the continuation of our college football conference breakdowns. We've gone through basically every single we went through every Power 5 conference a couple weeks ago. Now we went through almost every Group of 5 conference. Now it's time to fully wrap it up, and then a reminder, we'll get into the NFL divisions the next week. So get excited for that. But it's time to talk about the MAC, which is supposed to be the Psycho Conference, and this year should be no different. To go through the actual odds, this is easily the most unpredictable conference for this upcoming year for outrights because of how close the actual teams are at the top. Toledo's the favorite at plus 360. Miami, Ohio's plus 450. Central Michigan's plus 600. Northern Illinois is roughly in the same spot. I found 7-1 on them, but it's also around 600 in most spots. Starting off with you, who you picking as one of your favorites to get the job done?
Toledo. I mean, if you look, Toledo only won 7 games last year, but if you look at their losses, they lost by 3 to Eastern Michigan. They lost by 2 to Northern Illinois. They lost in overtime to Central Michigan. They lost to Middle Tennessee by 7. They went to Notre Dame and lost by 3.
Yeah, they should have won because the quarterback scored a touchdown instead of falling down at the 1. They could have taken a knee and kicked the field goal with no time left.
Yep. I just think that, you look at their schedule, they get they get Central Michigan at home, they get Kent State at home, they have to go to Northern Illinois. They're going to get tested in non-conference play before that because they go to Ohio State in September, then they go to San Diego State before conference play starts.
I mean, tested's one word. They might get killed, but that's a separate way to put it. But yeah.
So they'll probably be 2-2 in September, but then, conference play starts, and Toledo plays really well in the conference. You still got DeQuan Finn there, and he played pretty well as a freshman last year.
He only had 2 interceptions, so that was nice.
Yeah, and they've got Maddox in there still. He caught 41 balls a year ago. I just think that Toledo's a pretty good team, and I also like their win total going over because, let's face it, every team that was within one or played within one possession more than Toledo last year won at least, I think, 9 games.
So
and Toledo was 7-6.
What is Toledo's win total? I don't have that in front of me. Is it 8.5 again?
I think so. Let me double check real quick. Meanwhile, you can talk about your favorite pick.
I was going to say last year, I had one win total that I liked more than every other one. It was Toledo over 8.5. I had money on it, and it lost on me. So Toledo's dead to me. I still can't believe they went under. And if you go through the actual stats, Toledo had the most points for and the least points against in the conference, and they didn't even make the conference title game. You know how hard that is to do? to have the best offense and the best defense in a conference and to not make the conference title game, that's crazy. They were so atrocious in close games last year, and that's the concern that I have. And Finn's back. They have 4 returning offensive line starters. Kopach's gone from the running backs, but they do have a solid amount of backups that are capable of being starters. They have a good defense, and the schedule is pretty good. Central Michigan at home, at Northern Illinois, home against Kent State, at Western Michigan, but they don't play Miami, Ohio, which is a pretty solid perk. I just think that Candle's not a good coach. I saw them lose to Colorado State last year, and that was when Colorado State was bad. They just ended up losing at home pretty handily in that game. I don't think Candle's a good coach. And it's one thing if you want to lose some close games and some fluky things happen. It just looked like Toledo self-destructed every single fourth quarter when they really couldn't afford to. And I think it's coaching. So I think the main thing that can limit Toledo is the head coach because the talent on paper is undeniable. Are you a fan of Candle? Because last year gave me some serious red flags about him.
I'm not necessarily a big fan, but, I think he'll learn from his mistakes last year because they took the foot off the gas too often late in games, and that's what cost him. But I think, now he's going to learn from that. He won double digits in his first 2 seasons, won 20 games. Then he's won 24 over the last 4. The total for them is actually over 8.
Okay. I mean, I like it a lot more at a flat 8. The thing is, am I ready to get hurt again? I don't know, because it really hurt when Toledo they just kept losing by single digits every time. And it was so painful to experience. But yeah, they should, keyword should, win their division. The problem is their division's extremely tough.
True.
And I do think that might come back to bite them because they're in the same division as Northern Illinois and Western Michigan and Central Michigan. And there's a lot of talent in that division. So if they slip up even once or twice, that could be all it takes. Now, Lane's mentioning Lane is mentioning Central Michigan at plus 600. I originally had them as one of my dark horse candidates to actually have a shot at winning the conference. And then I looked at all the pieces they lost. I'm a big fan of Richardson. I think Richardson might be the best quarterback in the entire conference. I like Nichols the third, obviously, because I think he's definitely the best running back in the conference. They lost Pimpleton, so their wide receiver core is not exactly great. And they also lost their 2 best offensive linemen, both tackles who were all conference last year, ended up leaving. So they did lose a lot, and that does concern me. They also lost 5 key defensive pieces at the transfer portal. So
they weren't necessarily great defensively either. They didn't force a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, but the point is when you lose Pimpleton, who is one of your best weapons, arguably ever, you lose your 2 best offensive linemen, and you lose 5 key defensive pieces, and you look at their schedule, they play at Toledo, at Northern Illinois, at home against Western Michigan, and at Eastern Michigan. Now, Eastern Michigan's supposed to be mediocre, but when you're in the same division as Toledo and Northern Illinois, and you have to travel to both, I don't really like your chances of winning a really tough division. You?
I agree. And just clarify, Northern Illinois is in the West, not the East. Or they were at least in the West last year.
I thought they were in the East.
No, because Northern Illinois played Kent State last year in the MAC title game.
Kent State's in the Miami, Ohio region.
Right. Kent State's in the East with Toledo.
Okay. Yeah, okay. But Central Michigan is in the same division as Toledo and as Northern Illinois.
No, Central Michigan is in the West with Northern Illinois, not with Toledo.
No, Toledo's in the West. I'm looking at it on ESPN.
Okay, so Toledo moved. Okay, yeah, I'm used to Toledo being in the East in basketball.
I know for a fact that those 3 teams are in the same football division, and that is the West Division.
Yeah, Eastern Michigan's in there too.
But the point is, you're traveling on the road against the 2 best teams or the 2 teams you're competing with the most in that division. Either you're going to split them or you're going to lose both. And I don't think you can afford to lose the head-to-head against both teams you're competing with.
I would agree with that. I'm not necessarily – outside of Nichols, I mean, I'm not as sold on Richardson as you are.
I like him. I think that in the MAC, when most quarterbacks are unpredictable, I do like the fact that he's mobile and he has a pretty good arm. So I think he's very solid, and I do like that he's performed well the last couple of years. So there is some continuity there. But I can't look past those losses on the offensive line and defense. I think that's going to really hurt the full ceiling of this team.
And I'm not sold on Northern Illinois because I didn't like Rocky Lombardi at Michigan State. I don't really like him at Northern Illinois either.
I'm not exactly sold on Northern Illinois for different reasons. I really liked Lombardi last year. I thought he was going to be awful, and he was really good. But they were the opposite of Toledo. They won every close game last year, and I feel like a lot of it was fluky. If you actually look back on the box score, the play-by-play for a decent amount of those one-possession games, it involved some type of go-ahead score with like a minute to go. There were a lot of really close coin flip games, and it seems like Northern Illinois won every single coin flip game. And if you want to look at their injury report, Rudolph was their best receiver last year. He destroyed his knee about a week and a half ago. He's out for the year. So they're without their number one wide receiver from last year, and Ducker, their number one running back, transferred to Memphis. So they're missing a couple of key pieces. They do have the head coach, the offensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator back, which is a bit rare when you do that well in conference play and win a conference title. But I'm not sold on Northern Illinois, especially with Rudolph being gone. I think that really hurts that team because he was easily their best wide receiver.
Agreed. Rye said betting the MAC frustrates him to no end. If you bet the overs, it shouldn't frustrate you.
Yeah, my pick personally, Toledo, I couldn't get around to because of what happened last year, and I'm still not sold on Candle. I went with Miami, Ohio, just because it really sticks with my common theme of just picking the best team in the weakest division and hoping they get to the title game, which is half the battle. Miami, Ohio should, keyword should, win their division. And you look at the overall roster for Miami, Ohio, Gabbert's still at quarterback for about the 10th year in a row. They have pretty good running backs, a bit injury prone, but still pretty solid. Their wide receivers are good as well. They got 4 returning offensive line starters. They got a new defensive coordinator, but they promoted in-house. He's been a positions coach on the defensive side for several years. And I'm looking at the linebacking core, the secondary, they're good. And the schedule is pretty favorable. They play Kent State at home, Western Michigan at home, Ohio at home, and at Northern Illinois, but no Toledo and no Central Michigan. I think that they should win their division. That's good enough for me to pick them to win the actual conference at plus 450 because Miami's been quietly very good in this conference for the last couple of years.
And, you know, like you said, the East isn't that good. You got Akron in there, who's a dumpster fire. You've got Bowling Green, who I think their win total is 4.
Yeah, there's just actually a step in the right direction, but they're not even going to be close to a bowl game, obviously.
You know, you've got.
I think Buffalo is going to be terrible.
It's going to be tough for Buffalo. I mean, they lost McDuffie. He transferred to Georgia Tech. They lost Van Treese. He went to Georgia Southern.
Their coach is also not very good.
Well, he got picked up. You know, got promoted basically when Leopold decided it was a wise move to go to Kansas.
I'm just saying they didn't even make a bowl game last year. I don't think he's a good coach.
They got bit in a lot of close games too. They lost to Coastal by 3. They lost to Western Michigan by 7. They lost to Northern Illinois by 6 in overtime.
Yeah.
They lost to Bowling Green, but that was a game where it was close, and then Bowling Green pulled away late because they couldn't tackle anybody.
I was going to say, you said it was close. They gave up 50-plus points to Bowling Green. That's a serious red flag.
Yeah, it was arguably their worst game of the season because other than that, they gave up 48 to Kent State and 45 to Miami.
Yeah.
That was during the meltdown late in the season. But they had lost a bunch of guys by then. I know Van Treese was injured for a bit. Matt Myers is not the answer. He wasn't the answer coming into Buffalo, 4 years ago, which is why he lost the job to Van Treese then. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's going to be rough for them.
So
but they did bring some people in, so maybe they'll be a little better.
Well, the way that I'm looking at it, you mentioned Toledo. I just can't get around Toledo because of what happened last year in close games. I think it's a coaching issue. So my pick to win the conference is Miami, Ohio at plus 450. I like the value for an experienced team in a really crappy division. And I think that with the MAC title game especially, when in doubt, bet the underdogs. The underdogs have done extremely well in the MAC title game in the last couple of years. So I think there's some value there. And my sleeper, is going to be pretty much the same exact story that I just gave for Miami, Ohio. I'm going to pick Kent State at 10-1 because their division is so bad. And if there's going to be one team that overtakes Miami, Ohio, it would be Kent. Now, the defense for Kent State's atrocious. They did bring in a new defensive coordinator, and they got a lot of guys back from last year's defense. So maybe they can be mediocre. You know, I'm not picking them to be a top 3 defense in the conference, but as long as they're not bottom 2, I do think they can potentially get by. They lost Crum at quarterback, but a lot of people seem to be very high on Schlee. There's a lot of growing interest in him, and I think he could do a pretty good job as the quarterback. They still have both the running backs back with Cooper and Williams. They got Cephas back. They did lose 3 of their 4 pass catchers from last year, 3 of their top 4. But when you play that up-tempo, you're going to attract some recruits and transfers. But they did end up fixing or at least dealing with the absences on their offensive line. They lost 2 starting offensive linemen, but they got Big Ten transfers to fill the void there. I think Kent State could potentially overtake Miami, Ohio, 10-1 for a team that actually has a decent road to make the actual conference title game. I think might be worth a flyer. Their schedule is okay. They play at Miami, Ohio. They play at Toledo, but no Central Michigan and no Northern Illinois. Any thoughts on Kent State at 10-1 solely because their division sucks?
The one thing I can tell you is you mentioned people are high on Schlee. One person who is high on Schlee is a guy we've had on the show before, Rich Sermonello. He's big on Schlee at Kent State. Granted, the division is terrible, but I don't know if I can get behind a team that's probably going to be 1-3 going into conference play and getting smacked around. They go to Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia.
Yeah.
And until I can see if Jeremiah Johnson can do anything with a defense that was 121st in scoring defense a year ago, I'm not sure that they're going to get there. I'd probably have to lean to Miami of Ohio winning that division probably in a runaway because I'm not convinced Ohio can do anything. We talked about Buffalo being bad. It's just a bad division when you get right down to it. Bowling Green isn't going to be very good.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk about Akron. Joe Moorhead's going to try to revitalize that team.
But one person does because Lane said that he likes the Akron over 2.5 wins. I'm rooting for you. I'll tell you that much. But I just threw out Kent State.
I don't know where you're going to get the 2.5 wins from.
Well, I was going to say for the MAC in general, you tend to want to at least consider one double-digit shot there because it's so unpredictable. I'll take Kent State, who could be live in a crappy division.
Hey, you could ride Ohio in a crappy division too. They got the other Rourke playing.
Yeah, I don't like the other Rourke. That's the problem. So those are my 2 picks.
They did have Armani Rogers. I don't know if he's back again or if he decided that he was done.
Those are my 2 picks because I figured either I'll have a plus 450 shot in the conference title game or a 10-1 shot, and I get hedge when I get into the conference title. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. My favorite win total for this conference, though, is going to be Miami, Ohio. Their win total 6.5 at minus 133. Out of conference schedule is a mixed bag. They play at Kentucky. That's going to be a loss. They play Robert Morris at home. That's going to be a win. They play Cincinnati at a neutral. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think that game could be competitive. And if you want an upset call, I think they beat Northwestern in Northwestern. I don't think the Wildcats are any good, and I think that Ohio could sneak up on them. We saw Ohio give Minnesota a scare last year. I think Miami could potentially beat Northwestern, but you're looking at their overall schedule. Once again, they play Kent State at home, Western Michigan at home, Ohio at home, and Northern Illinois on the road. But 3 of those key conference games are at home. No Toledo, no Central Michigan. 6.5 for a very experienced team. I could see them winning 7 or 8 games.
I'm impressed you found it at 133 because it's at 160 at FanDuel the other day.
Yeah, I shopped around, so I found 133.
The win total I like, I could see Central Michigan edging over 7. That was minus 110.
Okay.
That or Northern Illinois, it's 6.5 at minus 110. Just because,
defending champions and they're at 6.5. That's a little bit disrespectful, but I
don't expect them to win 9 games, but I'd be happy if they won 7.
Well, that's the thing is that you're looking at Miami, Ohio, and that's why I like the 6.5 because they play 8 conference games, and if you think they beat Northwestern, which I think is possible, I think they're good enough to beat Northwestern because Northwestern's not supposed to be any good. They can really go over going 5-3 in conference play if they beat Northwestern. And I think they should, keyword should, win at least 6 conference games. So if they end up beating Robert Morris and they do what they should do in conference play in a weak division, Miami could really finish with like 8 or 9 wins. It really would not surprise me.
Yeah, I can see Northern Illinois, like we were just saying, getting to at least 7. You know, they bookend their season, open with Eastern Illinois, close against Akron.
Yeah.
They get Vanderbilt at home in non-conference play. They have to go to Tulsa and Kentucky. I don't think they'll beat Kentucky. But Tulsa's, a middle-of-the-road team in the AAC. They're not really anybody that impresses anybody. And then, like you said, in conference play, they get Toledo at home. They get Central Michigan at home. They get Miami of Ohio at home. They go to Eastern Michigan and Ohio. Those are probably their tough. Well, Ohio's not going to be really good, and they get Ball State on the road, and Ball State's going to be terrible.
I'm also trying to see how many freebies Miami, Ohio has. I said Robert Morris. They play at Northwestern. They play at Buffalo. They play against Ball State. Ball State's not supposed to be good either. But, of course, they end up playing against Akron and Bowling Green, too. So there's a lot of really bad teams on that Miami schedule.
Yeah.
I think 6.5 should be closer to like 7. I think they're going to win at least 7 games. But to go through some housekeeping stuff, Bill wanted to talk about the Wings. I knew they were going to be without their best scorer. We knew that going in, but they were playing well without her anyway. They got their ass kicked. I mean, there's no way around it. We just had a bad read on the game. Connecticut played its best game in over a month, and they crushed them. And Fernando Montoya wants to talk about the Ozuna news because he got arrested for a DUI. Can't say that I'm fully surprised because he's not exactly a good human being based on all the reports that have come out in the last couple of years and why he got suspended in the first place for domestic violence. Do you think the Braves cut him?
I think they should. Will they? I mean, how much money is he still owed?
Some. I don't know how much.
I'll see if I can find his contract real quick. I would get rid of him. I mean, it's not the first time he's been in trouble. I mean, in the last couple of years.
At some point, you're too big of a distraction to get rid of you. It's basically like I don't want to compare Ozuna to Antonio Brown because Antonio Brown is one of the most talented receivers of all time. But even eventually, you realize it's just not worth the circus.
He signed a 4-year, $65 million contract that runs through 2025.
They should consider getting rid of him, but we'll see.
I don't know. Would anybody take him?
I don't know, but that might not be his problem.
I mean, his cap hit is the 3rd highest on the Atlanta roster.
I don't think you can get all that waived because of a DUI, so we'll see what happens. But either way, I do at least want to point out that I think the Braves should, keyword should, get rid of him.
And by the way, after 1 inning at Wrigley Field, the Cubs 3, the Brewers 2.
Okay, I can't say I'm fully surprised there because of the fact that the wind's blowing out and you have Ashby against, I forgot who's against.
Keegan Thompson.
Okay, it is Keegan Thompson? Okay, yep. So McCutchen homered again. McCutchen's losing his damn mind over there. But
yeah. And Franmil Reyes hit a triple.
Good for him. I'm happy for him. I don't know how he's supposed to run for a triple, but he pulled
That's
it off
what I was
somehow.
going to say.
Yeah, but I was going to say, though, we are at about the 50-something minute mark. We haven't done any of the parlays yet, so I'll go through quickly the banners while you pull up anything you need to pull up. We're brought to you by BetMGM, and they have a great deal for first-time users of their app or website. Get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. All the information is in the show box. Check the age limits, and as always, bet responsibly.
And, of course, you can also get more picks from myself and Steen and, Reichel just does videos, but
yep.
All the experts at experts.winnersandwhiners.com, and there's all the premium picks available there as well. Don't pick the Padres ever again.
I'm not doing it.
I actually had the BC Lions as one of my picks today.
Okay.
We'll start with the Cleveland Guardians and the White Sox, Scott. It's an AL Central battle. The Guardians, of course, leading the AL Central. The White Sox not that far behind, but they're sending Lance Lynn to the mound against Tristan McKenzie. Can you say McKenzie's a bit unlucky that he's 8-9 despite a whip that's sub-1 and an ERA slightly over 3.
Yeah, I know that I backed him with unders twice on Total Chaos, or it was either Total Chaos or it was a podcast I was on, and he was awful both times. But I feel like he's been very good in every other start. I mean, when it comes to the starting pitching here, there's a no contest. McKenzie's light years ahead of Lance Lynn.
And the great part about that is if you look at Lance Lynn on the road, he sucks.
Yep.
Earned run average, he's 0-3 with a 746 earned run average on the road and a 162 whip. We just saw the White Sox, like we said, get tagged 21-5 yesterday. I'm not expecting a ton of production out of Lynn today. And the White Sox are just inconsistent. I'll say that. That's why they're only 3 games above 500. But I'm going to ride with McKenzie here. I think Cleveland gets the win.
I think so too.
And the Tampa Bay Rays and the Royals. Good thing Steen probably left because Kansas City hasn't scored any runs this week. Broke a 33 1/3 inning scoreless drought yesterday. Still lost 7-1.
Yeah, I'm happy for them. They still lost, but at least they scored.
Good pitching matchup. Who would have thought Brady Singer would be pitching this well for the Royals?
He has good stuff. I mean, Steen's been saying about every starting pitcher for the last 5 years on Kansas City. But Singer has been good. And McClanahan, you're looking at his numbers recently. He's been struggling a bit, but he's against Kansas City. And Tampa's been good lately, so I don't mind the Rays here too.
Yeah, and McClanahan, he is coming off a win in his last start. He shut down Baltimore, gave up 2 runs in 6 innings of an 8-2 win over the weekend. Only struck out 4 guys. I was a bit surprised by that because, McClanahan had been striking out guys at a pretty good clip earlier in the season. But still, Kansas City, they don't hit well. So I'm going to fade them here. I mean, they lost 7-1 to Luis Patino yesterday.
Yeah.
So that takes us to 2 for the money, and we will talk about the Seattle Mariners and the A's. Scott, it's supposed to be Marco Gonzalez. I've seen it go black to we don't know, then back to Gonzalez, then back to blank. I think it's still supposed to be Gonzalez. Cole Irvin going for the A's. Anything you want to say about Oakland?
Irvin's been decent lately, but on principle, minus 130. I get that Gonzalez has been very bad on the road. So maybe if you like Oakland, take a team total. But I'm not picking Oakland to win any baseball game against a decent team. Like, Oakland still sucks. Like, don't get it wrong here. If you want to take Oakland, I would take first 5 if you're solely focused on fading Marco. But I can't take them in full game here. I think it's Seattle or pass at this price especially.
Oh, and I was wrong. Steen is here. He said he's got Kansas City in the first 5 at plus 165.
It's a good plus price at 165.
But the question is, can the Royals score any runs?
You might only need to score 1 or 2 if Singer keeps dealing.
Well, right, but I mean, if it's 0-0, you're not winning anything.
I mean, you could take plus a half, but I think Kansas City might get a run or 2 across. We'll see what happens.
But yeah, I'm still leaning with Tampa Bay there. The Braves over the Astros. This game coming to you from down in Hotlanta. Kyle Wright and Lance McCullers. Now, McCullers looked good in his first start. How's he going to deal with a lineup that can actually hit?
Yeah, that's kind of the story. McCullers I've liked for a while. I think he's going to be an underrated piece in potentially that bullpen for Houston in the playoffs. But his arm still isn't really stretched out. He's had 1 start in the majors this season against a bad team, and now he's facing off against Atlanta. And confidence is high in Atlanta. They just beat the Mets 3 out of 4, and Wright's been good. The issue I'd have is that Houston scored 21 runs yesterday, so you're wondering if the bats might continue to hit well. But we saw with San Diego, after scoring 10 in the final game against Miami, that it's kind of episodic. There's no guarantee it's going to carry over game in, game out. But Atlanta's the better pitcher, and they've also been really, really good at home. So I think you're getting a pretty good price there with Atlanta.
Also leaning towards the over there because I think the potential for runs is there on both sides.
Well, total's a flat 8, so I feel like that's automatically tempting towards the over.
And then the Reds and the Pirates. Yes, that's right. I wasn't going to put up the Dodgers. Everybody knows you should take the Dodgers at home over the Marlins. So I wanted to put something up a little different. I like the Reds here. Ashcraft, against Bryce Wilson. Not sold on Bryce Wilson. Not sold on the Pirates. I think they used up all their runs for the week yesterday. Anything you want to say about either one of those starting pitchers?
Ashcraft is not that bad. He was very good when he started out. Then he was awful for a bit of a stretch, but recently he's been pretty decent. I mean, he usually gets into the 7th inning, and he's usually giving up 3 earned runs tops. I mean, he's had 3 earned runs or less in each of the last 4 starts. So he has been pitching pretty well, and Wilson's not very good. I don't mind that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Pirates. I mean,
yeah.
Can we say anything good about the Pirates?
They scored
anybody have anything good to say about the Pirates? Anybody at all?
I think Brian Reynolds is a pretty decent player. That's all I really have to say.
He's pretty okay.
Yeah, he's fine. I mean, best player on a bad team.
Let's see. Steve, if you're there, do you have anything good to say about the Pirates?
Nice stadium. PNC Park, very pretty.
Why? Because of the river?
Just in general. It's a nice ballpark, but the team sucks. That's the problem.
Well, they've sucked since, 1993?
Since McCutcheon was there?
Well, before that.
They made a couple wild card games, if that counts.
Yeah, they got shut out by Arrieta in 2015.
They also got killed by the Giants, but that's a separate story.
If we go to 4 for the show, there's the Guardians. We talked about them a minute ago. I like the Rangers tonight, Scott. I have no faith in Dylan Bundy. I'd rather see King Kong Bundy pitching.
Yeah, and Perez has been good this year.
Yeah, I mean, pretty good 1-year deal for him.
Mm-hmm.
BC, yeah, the line did move to 3.5 when I put this up. Over Saskatchewan, we talked about Cody Fajardo and the Rough Riders. They just don't look that good all of a sudden. They had lost 3 in a row. They beat Edmonton. So what? I can find a whole bunch of teams that beat Edmonton. Scott said, yes, great ballpark, horrible team.
Yep. That's how I would describe him in one sentence.
And I'm going to take the Phillies over the Mets, Scott. It's Nola against Bassett. Like you said, the Mets lost 3 of 4 to the Braves. The Phillies had the day off yesterday after losing 1-0 to the Reds on Wednesday. They're at home. It's a big series here because, now the Phillies can make up some ground and put themselves in a better spot in the playoff race. What do you make of this contest going into tomorrow's doubleheader at Citizens Bank?
The one concern I would have for Nola is the fact that he did just face the Mets. He pitched very well, but they just saw him, which kind of concerns me. But Bassett, his last couple starts, he's been incredible. His last 3 starts, he's gone 20 innings, 0 runs, or 0 earned runs, 1 run that wasn't his responsibility. So he's been great, and he also just faced Philly, 5 innings, no runs. So I guess the argument is that since each pitcher just saw the opposing offense, maybe they would struggle. Plus, the wind is blowing out pretty heavily, and each pitcher's allowed 15 home runs. You might see a couple long balls in this game, but I do think Nola is the better overall pitcher than Bassett. I have to at least point out that Bassett hasn't given up an earned run each of his last 3 outings.
Well, and Nola's given up exactly 1 in each of his last 3, spanning the same 20 innings.
Both pitchers have been really good. That's kind of the takeaway. But
yeah. Which way are you leaning there?
I'd probably lean Philly, just because their bullpen is well rested since they didn't have to use anybody yesterday because they didn't play. The Mets, even though they were competitive yesterday, still had to use a couple of bullpen arms. That concerns me a bit. And I think Nola's a better pitcher than Bassett, but I think I am leaning to the over in that game. I know that a lot of people are going to love the under because of Bassett and Nola, but the wind, I think, is a big factor with the amount of home runs that each pitcher is allowed. I think the low total might be a little bit trappy.
Yeah, Nathan said Mets Phillies first 5 under 4. And Fernando said the under in the Texas game.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the total was for the Texas Twins game. I hadn't looked at it since this morning. It looks like it's still 8.
If you think Perez is going to pitch well, then it's probably worth a shot, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, can you count on Bundy to do his part?
Yeah, that's the real question.
Because he's still got an ERA of 4.76 on the year.
Yep.
And now we'll go to the shot in the dark. I'm going to go with Hoskins over 1.5 total bases, like you said. Wind's blowing pretty stiffly at Citizens Bank Park, and we saw Hoskins have a bit of a power surge in recent weeks. CJ Crone, last time I put him up here, he didn't play. We'll see if that trend continues. He gets to face the Giants at Coors. Anything you want to say about that game, Scott? The Giants and the Rockies, of course.
Not particularly. It's Coors Field. Crone's been amazing at home this season. So if you want to look at a guy who could go yard at any given time, Crone's probably your guy.
Look for Ohtani to go over 1.5 total bases. He's not pitching tonight, so there's that. Same with Buxton. Somebody's got a hit for the Twins. Either Buxton is going to go 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts, or he's going to homer.
And I've looked at his numbers against Perez before. He actually has pretty good career numbers. I think he's batting like .364 with a homer against Perez, I think.
Sounds about right. Kyle Tucker of the Astros, like we said, he's basically Yordan Alvarez, except he's faster, so he can, leg one out for you. Mm-hmm. Haniger against the A's, if he puts one in the gap, they might still be chasing it tomorrow. My reach for the day, I'm going to take the Tigers with Matt Manning over the Angels. That game's at Comerica Park. Manning hasn't been bad in his 5 starts, and Sandoval in his last 10 is 0-7.
That's not good.
Hasn't looked good. I mean, there's his no decisions. He threw 5 innings and 6 innings, giving up 1 run. And then his other no decision, he went 5 1/3 in that game against Seattle a couple weeks ago, gave up no runs. In a game they ended up winning 4-3, but 0-7 in his last 10.
Yeah.
That's
and you're getting plus money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Detroit. You don't expect them to score a bunch of runs.
Well, still, I'm just saying 0-7, you're getting plus money fading him. That's not a bad option.
Yeah, Manning has no decisions yet, but he pitched in that game against Tampa Bay where they lost 7-0 by giving up 7 in the 9th. He threw 7 innings in that game, gave up no runs on 4 hits, 3 walks, struck out 7. Pitched okay against the White Sox, gave up 4 runs in 5 innings. That was his worst start so far this year. You could do worse than backing the Tigers there at home, given the Angels have quit about 3 months ago.
Yep.
Then strikeout props, Gaussman over 6.5. Can you trust the Yankees bats at this point?
Here's my play of the day. I got Toronto.
Okay.
I mean, Gaussman's numbers this season have been kind of odd because he's terrible at home. I mean, atrocious at home, but he's amazing on the road, and the Yankees can't hit. So.
Yeah, Nola over 6.5. Like we said, he punched out 8, I think, in the last start against them. And Blake Snell over 7.5 against Washington. It's probably the only way I'm going to take the Padres for the time being. Is basically on player props. Snell struck out 10 against Washington Sunday.
He's been incredible for the last month and change.
Yeah, I mean, people have talked about he's a second half pitcher, but he's obviously been a lot better than he was at the beginning. Nathan said, I wonder if Steen is salty you're taking the Rays. Well, he bet on the Royals today, which is unusual.
He bet first 5, though, so even he expects the Royals bullpen to potentially blow a lead late. So there's a way both of you can win.
Speaking of the Royals bullpen, I see Brad Keller showed up yesterday out of the bullpen to give up 5 runs on 6 hits and 2/3 of an inning.
At least he's consistent, He's bad as a starter. He's bad as a reliever. It's consistent.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for consistency.
Yep, that is true.
Anything else you want to add, Scott?
Not really. Looking forward to hopefully a profitable weekend for all of us. I'll be back once again, same time on Monday. I'm going to let you pick which NFL division we cover first, though.
Let's start in the division that we know the best, and that's the AFC East.
Okay, so we're going to go through the AFC East on Monday, and we'll probably do the AFC first and the NFC. But until next time, and for the entire weekend, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.